So welcome to the Easpiration conversation part 2. It's great to be here. Could you just want to say hello and introduce yourselves?
Okay.
I'm Steph. I do kids church every month, and yeah.
Good morning, I'm Rachael. I do youth. I don't know if that's relevant, but yeah.
Well, it is. And one of the reasons we wanted you to be involved today with the children here is we thought your modern and contemporary outlook on life, and that you speak their language and all that sort of thing, you can help keep me on track.
Yeah, I think they might disagree with that.
Yeah, there we go. So we're going to speak about the resurrection. We're going to talk about Mary Magdalene at the tomb at John chapter 20. We're going to talk about the road to Emmaus, and then we're going to talk about what the resurrection means to us today. Does that sound right? Great, we're all in the right place. So let's start. We read earlier from John 20. Mary Magdalene at the tomb then. Who wants to start us off? What strikes you? What?
I mean, to find he was so important to her, do you know what I mean? And to find that one of the most important things in your life is just gone. I mean, you can all imagine how that must feel. I mean, I've been worried that my children are not home on time and stuff like that, and that's bad enough. But to find that he's been just taken and he's just not there anymore, I mean, you want to do everything that you can and she must have been just, to not recognise him because of probably those tears, the fact that just didn't believe that they would be him. Do you know what I mean? How could it? But yeah, that was the fact that she didn't recognise him was kind of like just, gosh, yeah, I can imagine that. Just the pure disbelief that it would be him, and just the imagination that it would be somebody else.
Yeah, I think I was really struck by the emotion of it. And I think having recently experienced bereavement, and I know others in the church family have, it's the big feelings, sadness, grief, that pain. And that it wasn't even as though it was a few days later. I think the first days after you lose somebody are so... Well, they're just a bit all-consuming, and it's almost as though you're kind of in a little bubble when it's somebody really close to you, and it's just a lot. And I think I've been reflecting on how that's the place that Mary would have been. And then the idea that he might then have risen from the dead, because we heard that they didn't really understand what the scriptures and what he was saying. And so then it must have been just not, you just wouldn't imagine it. And so it's really far-fetched. And I think I've just been really struck by the use of her name, and how personal that would have felt. And we have a bit of a joke in our house about using people's names and how many times my kids say mummy during the course of a day. And there's a funny one about, doing an exercise every time your child says mummy and then you end up really fit. And I just think it's really powerful when somebody knows you really well, knows your name and says your name. And it means a lot, and I can fully imagine, as Steph said, that she was there just not really having any idea that this person stood there was Jesus. And then the moment he says her name, it speaks of a really deep relationship that they had, and just a really special moment. And I have been trying to imagine what it must be like having been in that phase of grief, and then all of a sudden that person that you've been feeling all those things, then saying your name. It kind of blows my mind a little bit, and I can't.
He says my name like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And I love the way we've jumped straight to the reality of the story, but also one of the things people struggle with the resurrection accounts. You think, well, why didn't she recognise him? That's a bit weird. And in fact, I was looking at some artwork earlier of Caravaggio's The Supper at Emmaus. And in that, I was reading something about it, and it said Caravaggio paints Jesus without his beard. And is that the reason that she didn't recognise him? It's a bit like Superman with his glasses on and off, isn't it? It's a bit ridiculous. But I love what you said about that emotion and the tears and the disbelief and the shock, and it's very believable, isn't it? Yeah. It's a strange thing. You mentioned earlier about they didn't believe. I forget the phrase you just used. Straight out of the Bible, they didn't believe what Scripture had said. And Jesus had been so clear with them, hadn't he, that he would die and rise again. Either of you got any ideas why that hadn't sunk in for them? Any thoughts?
I guess death is so, for most people, so final, isn't it? Like, death is like, I'm never going to see this person again. And so maybe in that grief and stuff, they couldn't maybe remember what he'd said. And so they're only thinking about that finality and the end of and stuff like that, maybe.
Yeah, I'd agree, kind of would agree with that. And I also wonder whether, you know when you watch a superhero movie and then you also watch those programs where anyone can die at any moment. And in the superhero movies, I have sort of a chilled outness because I know the superhero's never going to die. And I wonder whether it's a little bit as though maybe the disciples, they might have heard it, but because, we can talk about whether Jesus is a superhero on another day, but I just wonder whether they, because of everything that Scripture had said about the Messiah, the idea of the Messiah dying was so completely the opposite of what they were maybe expecting. And also there's no way that they would have understood or been able to make sense of the bit that comes after. I think even reading about it, sometimes it's a bit hard to make sense of it, but they wouldn't have understood the significance of his death and resurrection at the point before it had happened. So I can imagine a little bit as though, imagine watching a Superman film and then Superman dying. It just doesn't kind of compute and it doesn't really make sense.
Good guy never dies.
Well, yeah, unless, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I just wonder whether there's a bit of it was so far-fetched to them and it just didn't make sense. And so I also wonder if in that day, and I love what you posted on Instagram yesterday about that day in between Good Friday and Easter Sunday and that feeling of kind of lowness. I wonder whether in the middle of all of the loss of a friend, there was also this, I thought that you were it and now you've gone. I can't. That's quite a lot to process for anybody, isn't it?
Yeah. And particularly last week we were thinking about the crowd chanting Hosanna, which is it, the superheroes here. And that was their perception, wasn't it? They've come to save us in power and it's going to be amazing. And that loss of devastation must have been, it's not just a bereavement, it's the loss of that sense of everything I believed in had just been torn down. So.
And I wonder why, because later on in that chapter there's a story of Thomas, and I wonder whether there's a bit of that's why it was maybe so hard for the disciples to comprehend what was going on and make sense of it all, because it was just a bit like, hang on a minute, this isn't what I was expecting at all, and they're reeling from that loss and feeling let down and feeling like their faith was rocked. And so the comeback is almost even more significant because it's like, oh, okay, I get it.
Absolutely, and I think that's why the resurrection is so significant, because there are some Christians I know over the years who said, of course it didn't really happen, people don't rise from the dead, but actually if there is no physical resurrection, our faith doesn't work, and it is powerful. Steph, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the road to Emmaus as well. Do you want to just tell us a bit about that?
I was kind of like, the fact that they were kept from recognising Jesus. And then like they take a walk with him and he's just like, you silly billies, kind of thing. Like, it's all in the Scripture. How did you not know that he was gonna, he's meant to rise again? That's the whole point of it. He's meant to die and then rise. How do you not? And then he teaches them and then they take communion together and then he just their eyes are opened to who he is and then he just goes. What?
Amazing. And the thing I find about that Emmaus, it always cheers me up, because I think, in those moments when I think other people are looking at me thinking, does Graeme Ross not understand that bit of his faith yet? Jesus is looking down with a bit more patience, which is good, isn't it? Yeah, Emmaus. Any other thoughts on Emmaus? No, okay, that's fine. So let's finish the conversation reflecting on ourselves and today. What does it mean to you both today that Jesus is alive?
I remember hearing about it when I was a kid, and I mean, I just bawled my eyes out because I was just like, sorry, what? This man who has no clue who I am yet, do you know what I mean? And he died for me, and then instead of staying dead and just disappearing, he came back for me. And I mean, and he forgave everything, and he made it so I could be forgiven. But yeah, that was just blows my mind.
Thank you.
I think the word that springs to mind for me is hope. And I think there's a couple of things, and maybe it is linked to the Road to Emmaus story that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the word, I think it was the word encountered, I think I mentioned that. And it's just really stuck with me. And I think the idea of that Jesus, it can all feel very confusing and baffling and a bit strange. But I think when you've had an encounter with Jesus and when he does know who you are and he does know your name and you are known by him and loved by him, and also when you've got a relationship with him or when you kind of meet and are touched by him. And I think when you read about what the disciples did next and when they went out and they shared, and it was, it's such a powerful message of hope. But it's just tangled up with this idea that it's not something that's abstract and is there. It's that God, in the way that he addressed Mary, and Mary knew him and had that really strong relationship with him, he wants that with us too. And that idea of encountering God and encountering him through the life of Jesus, you know, and Jesus kind of speaking into our lives and talking to us, and that relational element of it, it just, I don't know, I think it's an amazing thing. And having that, carrying that hope that even in those really difficult, really dark moments when nothing's going as we would like it to, and when maybe God isn't doing the things that we want him to, that actually there's that hope there that we're known and we're loved. And we can have that relationship.
Yeah, great. Oh, thank you so much. That's been really helpful. Should we give them a round of applause? Wonderful. Well done.